The mid-8th century BC finds the northern kingdom of Israel basking in political peace under Jeroboam II. But beneath the prosperity, a rot spreads through the land. Spiritual decay has hollowed out the nation's heart. At Bethel and Dan, golden calves stand as counterfeit altars, blurring the line between Yahweh and the Canaanite fertility cults. The people have forgotten their covenant. They chase after Baal and Asherah, confusing sacred ecstasy with divine intimacy. Into this world of spiritual adultery steps a prophet named Hosea, whose very name means salvation. You might expect a thunderous call to repentance, but instead God gives a command so shocking it severs the soul. Hosea chapter 1 verse 2, "Go, take to yourself a wife of whoredom and have children of whoredom." This is no metaphor. God instructs Hosea to marry a woman who will be unfaithful, to embody the anguish of divine love betrayed. The whispers begin in the narrow streets the moment he obeys. Pitying looks follow him like a specter. He chooses a woman named Gomer Bat D. Blame, her name possibly meaning completion or consummation. It hints at a love that will be fully requited only through suffering, a bitter completion of a broken vow. Imagine the small village, the dust caking your sandals, the olive groves rustling on the hillsides as you watch the prophet walk to his wedding. His hands tremble as he grips the doorpost, knowing she will break his heart, knowing God has asked for this living parable. The ceremony is not joyous. It is a funeral dirge dressed in wedding linens. Gomer bears children, and each name becomes a verdict. Jezreel, Lo Ruhamah, Lo Ami, words of scattering, no mercy, not my people. Every time Hosea calls his son God scatters, the neighbors hear the indictment against their own house of Jehu. Every time he rocks a daughter named No Mercy, the silence in his home screams louder than any prophetic speech. You can feel the shame clinging to him like sackcloth, the constant sting of being both a prophet and a cuckold. And yet, this is not ultimately about Hosea's pain. It is God putting his own broken heart on display. For how long has Yahweh endured Israel's whoredom, chasing after gods of wood and stone while feigning love in his house? The command reveals a terrifying truth. God is not distant in his anger. He is wounded, betrayed, clenching his chest over a wife who no longer knows his name. In the Hebrew, the word for whoredom here is zana, the same root used for Israel's idolatry throughout the prophets. It is a raw, physical term for a spiritual reality, a betrayal that happens in the marriage bed and the temple sanctuary simultaneously. Hosea's obedience does not sanitize the command. He walks into the nightmare fully aware. An agonizing question rises from the dust, the scandal of a God who would command such pain. And the answer begins to surface only when you see the tears in the Ancient of Days. This is not a test. It is a revelation of a heart shattered by relentless love. The man of God stands at the edge of the village market, his knuckles white, gripping the leather strap of his sandal. He watches the woman named for completion, yet the town sees only her brokenness, and whispers follow her like dust. The command to marry her is not about testing obedience. It is a doorway into the agony of divine love betrayed. The prophet's trembling yes becomes the canvas on which the Holy One paints his own shattered heart. A child is born in a dusty Israelite home, and the prophet gives him a name soaked in bloodshed, Jezreel. You see, the valley of Jezreel was a place of massacre, where Jehu's slaughter paved a path of bones. Now that dynasty will end. The bow of Israel will snap in this very valley when Assyria comes. A daughter arrives next, and the name Lo Ruhamah chills the heart. She is called No Mercy. God declares, I will no longer have mercy on Israel. The womb that should bring life now delivers a verdict. Then comes Lo Ami, a third child whose name cuts deepest. Not my people. The covenant is torn. God speaks through a child's name. You are not my people, and I am not your God. But wait, in the very next breath, a promise erupts. The place of slaughter becomes the gate of hope. Hosea chapter 1 verse 10 thunders that the children of Israel will be as the sand of the sea, and right where it was said, not my people, they will be called children of the living God. This is the heartbeat of Hosea, judgment and hope intertwined like a double-edged sword. Now step inside Hosea's daily life. The scent of baking bread fills the room, but the table is set for one. His wife Gomer slips away again. The neighbors whisper and their children play without her. Laughter of other families echoes in the courtyard, But in Hosea's home there is a hollow silence. You can almost hear the prophet's heart cracking as he watches the woman he loves chase her lovers. She believes her lovers give her bread and water, wool and linen, oil and drink, but she does not know it is the Lord who gave her the grain and new wine and the silver and gold. This is Israel's spiritual adultery, offering prayers to Baal on every high place while forgetting the God who brought them out of Egypt. Sacred prostitution becomes their new liturgy. They burn incense to stone idols and kiss calf statues. God is not an abstract force. He is the wounded husband watching his bride give herself to another. Hosea feels every ounce of that betrayal. The knot in his stomach, the sleepless nights, the breaking dawn. There is a Hebrew word on the edge of hearing, a whisper of a love that will not let go, Hesed. It speaks of steadfast love, covenantal loyalty, the very thing that has been shattered into 1,000 pieces. But for now, the word is only a faint echo, a distant memory of vows spoken in the wilderness. The house of Hosea becomes a living parable of God's own agony, a mirror of the divine heartbreak. And Israel continues to dance around altars, blind to the husband who still calls her name in the night. The first son is named Jezreel, a valley where bloodshed soaked the soil and a dynasty's end was decreed by heaven. Then a daughter, Lo Ruhamah, no mercy. God withdraws pity from a nation that has scorned his covenant. A third child, Lo Ami, not my people. The covenant is broken, the bond of kinship is severed by divine decree. Yet instantly a counternote sounds. In the very place of rejection, they will be called children of the living God. Inside Hosea's house, the quiet is punctuated by Gomer's footsteps leaving at dusk, while neighbors whisper and children stare. And a word drifts through the darkened rooms, Hesed, the loyal love that once bound them, now a ghost of a promise. Hosea chapter 2 verse 14 begins not with a blow, but with the breath of longing. Therefore, behold, I will allure her. The Hebrew word patha means to persuade, to seduce, to open the heart of the one who has closed herself off. God does not drag Israel into the wilderness with chains. He leads with a voice that remembers the betrothal at Sinai. The wilderness is where you have nothing but God. It is the place where every idol's whisper dies in the silence. Verse 15 promises that the valley of Achor, the valley of trouble, where Achan was stoned, will become a door of hope. Trouble is not the final word. The place of past judgment becomes the portal of new mercy. The language shifts in verse 16. You will call me Ishi, my husband, and no longer call me Baali, my master. The name Baal had become a cancer in Israel's mouth. Every utterance of Baal was a confession that Yahweh was just another Lord. Now God strips the language of its poison. He will not be spoken of as a mere owner. He will be known as the lover of the soul. Verse 18 paints a surreal peace, a covenant with the wild beasts. The animal kingdom becomes a sanctuary, not a threat. And then the crescendo in verse 19, I will betroth you to me forever. Not for a season, not under condition, forever. 3 words anchor this betrothal: righteousness, justice, Hesed, each one a pillar driven deep into covenant ground, and then mercy, Rakamim, the plural of womb. It is a mother's fierce compassion, a love that labors to bring new life. Hesed, we learn now, is the steel thread weaving through all of this. It is covenant loyalty that bleeds when the bond is broken. It is more than love. It is the stubborn, costly, one-sided commitment to be faithful even when faithfulness is not returned. Hesed is what makes God's heartbreak not a tragedy but a furnace. It burns away pretense and leaves only what is real. While Israel is being allured, Gomer is sinking. Hosea chapter 3 implies she has sold herself into destitution, a slave to her own choices. Her lovers have abandoned her. The promises of pleasure have curdled into chains. She is property now, her value fixed by silver and barley. The parallel is devastating. Israel in a spiritual wilderness, stripped of her finery. Gomer in a physical wilderness, stripped of her dignity. Both are empty. And yet, into that emptiness, Yahweh speaks. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord. The Hebrew word for know, yada, is the word of deep intimacy, not intellectual awareness, marital union. It is a return to Eden. Verse 21 through 23 shatter the silence of creation. The heavens will answer the earth will answer the grain, the wine, the oil. This is not magic, it is the restoration of covenant order. When the heart turns, the land heals. The curse of Hosea chapter 4 is reversed. The names of the children, Jezreel, Lo-Ruhamah, Lo-Ami, are rewritten. God sows mercy into the very soil of their identity. I will have mercy on no mercy. I will say to not my people, you are my people, and they will say, you are my God. The circle closes. This is the moment the broken heart begins to mend. Not because the wound is ignored, but because Hesed has paid the price to heal it. The wilderness, you see, is not where love goes to die. It is the only place love can be resurrected from the ashes of betrayal. So God draws her into the wilderness, a stark, silent place where all other voices fade. There he speaks tenderly to her heart. The valley of Achor, the valley of trouble, becomes a door of hope. What was once a monument to judgment now stands as a threshold of renewal. He does not merely forgive, he betroths her forever in righteousness, justice, Hesed, and mercy. This is covenant love in action. Hesed is not a passive emotion, it is the active, pursuing loyalty that refuses to let go. A love that costs everything and gives more. The word of the Lord commands Hosea again. Go, love a woman loved by another man, an adulteress. He walks through the dusty streets to the slave market, his heart pounding with grief and obedience. The market reeks of misery and sweat. The auction block stands before a jeering crowd. There she is, Gomer, chained and exposed, her eyes hollow, her dignity stripped away. The auctioneer shouts a price. Hosea steps forward, coins clutched in his trembling hand. He haggles desperately, pouring out 15 silver shekels and all the barley he has scraped together. 15 shekels of silver, the price of a common slave, and a homer and a lethek of barley. Silver and grain mingle in the dust, the cost of a shattered covenant measured in currency and food. The crowd stares. Gomer cannot lift her eyes as shame burns on her face. This is Hesed crystallized into action, love that refuses to let go, no matter the price. Even as the Lord loves the children of Israel, though they turn to the Baals and love idol raisin cakes. Israel has sold herself into spiritual slavery, yet God stoops to buy her back. He will pay the redemption price, not with silver or grain, but with his own relentless covenant love. After the purchase, Hosea leads Gomer away, but not to a restored marriage bed. You shall dwell as mine for many days, he tells her, and you shall not play the harlot. A season of isolation settles over her like a heavy silence, a symbolic exile. This mirrors Israel's coming exile, cut off from king, sacrifice, and even her cherished idols. But the isolation is not abandonment. It is a severe mercy, a stripping away for purification. Afterward, the promise declares, the children of Israel will return and seek the Lord their God. They will come in trembling awe, seeking David their king, embracing the messianic hope. And what of Gomer? We strain to hear her voice, her repentance, her gratitude, but the text is silent. We never read her response. Not one word of confession or plea for forgiveness. Because this story is not about her worthiness. It is about his scandalous, unmerited love. In a dim room, a clay lamp sputters. Tears fall onto the pile of coins and scattered barley. This is the cost of redemption. Love that pays the highest price for the one who broke its heart. This is Hesed, a love that bleeds, a covenant that pays, a mercy that defies all reason. The prophet stands before her captor, silver heavy in his palm. 15 shekels, a measure of barley, all he could gather. Silver and grain mingled together, the price of a slave. Love counting out its last resource, holding nothing back. Coins clatter onto the stone. The merchant shrugs. And she, the beloved betrayer, flinches under the stares of passers-by. Hesed does not whisper from a distance. It steps into the marketplace, pays the debt, and takes the shame as its own. Then comes the hard mercy, a season of isolation, not punishment, but purification. She will dwell alone, belonging yet set apart, just as Israel would be stripped of idols, left without king or sacrifice, waiting for restoration and a true king. The scroll never tells us how she responded, because Hesed doesn't demand a worthy recipient, it only demands a faithful lover. The Hebrew word woven through Hosea's prophecy is Hesed, a term appearing over 250 times in the Old Testament. It is translated as loving kindness, mercy, steadfast love, or loyalty, but none fully capture its depth. Hesed is covenant love in action, a love that persists even when the other party breaks every promise. In Hosea's story, Hesed is the heartbeat of God's relationship with Israel, bleeding through every line. God speaks through the prophet, "For I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings." This is the divine lament. Religion without relationship is empty, a hollow shell of rituals. Later in Hosea chapter 11 verses 8 through 9, the divine heart breaks open before our eyes. God cries out, "How can I give you up, O Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? My heart recoils within me, my compassion grows warm and tender." The Hebrew word for heart here is kilia, kidneys. In Hebrew thought, the kidneys were the seat of the deepest emotions, the place where love twists in agony. God's divine insides churn with a love so fierce it overrides the demands of justice. He declares, "I will not execute my fierce anger, for I am God and not a man, the Holy One in your midst." Here he absorbs the cost of betrayal. Justice is not ignored, it is swallowed by a deeper love. This is the broken heart of God, a love so intense that it suffers for the beloved rather than destroying. Picture a father running without dignity down a dusty road toward a son covered in shame. Imagine a mother who cannot forget her nursing child, her body aching with love for the infant she bore. Visualize a husband weeping over old love letters, the ink smeared by tears of longing for his unfaithful bride. Human love flickers and fails. We break our vows when the flame of emotion dies out. But divine Hesed is a burn-the-ships kind of love, a covenant fire that never goes out. It is not a passive feeling but a relentless, active force that binds the Almighty to his promises forever. Hosea's entire life became a prophetic theater of this Hesed, as he loved a woman who ran to other lovers. Every time he bought her back from slavery, every time he forgave, he mirrored the divine heart breaking and mending. Through the pain, Hosea discovered that Hesed is not just one of God's attributes, it is the core of who he is. The prophet's sorrow became a window into the divine ache, a pain that only a love like Hesed could carry. This word is the answer to Hosea's agony and the key that unlocks the entire biblical narrative. Without Hesed, the cross remains a mystery. With it, we see the suffering heart of God laid bare. It is the scarlet thread woven from Genesis to Revelation, the relentless love that never lets go. Hesed is the divine answer to human faithlessness, a love that endures when everything else fails. Woven into the fabric of Scripture, one Hebrew word appears over 250 times, yet its depth remains veiled to most. Hesed, translated loving kindness, mercy, steadfast love, and loyalty. Through the prophet Hosea, God cries out, "I desire Hesed and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings." A divine lament that religion without relationship is hollow. In Hosea chapter 11, God's heart, his kilia, his kidneys, recoils within him. "How can I give you up, O Ephraim? My compassion grows warm and tender." His Hesed overrules his justice, not by ignoring sin but by absorbing its cost. The prophet's life becomes a living parable, sketching the outline of a redemption yet to come. Centuries later, a Nazarene teacher steps into the same divine drama, seeking a wayward bride. He finds his beloved not in a brothel, but in the dusty streets of humanity, broken and enslaved by sin. The price is not silver and barley, as the prophet paid, but something infinitely more costly. At a Roman cross, the divine Hesed is poured out in blood, the bride price for an unfaithful people. The apostle writes to Ephesus, "Christ loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her." This is Hesed in the flesh, a love that stoops to wash dirt from calloused feet. The word from Hosea echoes, "When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son." The gospel writer seizes this verse, applying it to the flight of the Holy Family into Egypt. Jesus becomes the true Israel, the faithful son who succeeds where the nation failed in the wilderness. The marriage metaphor, first whispered in Hosea, now thunders through the New Testament with unstoppable force. John the Baptizer calls himself the friend of the bridegroom, pointing to the coming union between heaven and earth. The Apostle Paul presents the church as a pure virgin betrothed to one husband, the Messiah. But Revelation transports us to the consummation. The wedding supper of the Lamb has finally come. The once unfaithful bride is now arrayed in fine linen, bright and clean, reflecting her bridegroom's glory. At the heart of this story lies a spear thrust into the side of the crucified, releasing blood and water. That wound is the ruptured heart of God, broken over wayward humanity, echoing Hosea's ancient anguish. The prophet once cried, "How can I give you up, Ephraim? My heart churns within me." Now, on Golgotha, the divine heart is fully unveiled, forgiving, restoring, loving beyond all reason. This is Hesed made flesh, a love that does not count the cost, that redeems what is worthless. To know this Hesed is to be transformed. You cannot encounter it and remain unchanged. The one Hebrew word that reveals God's broken heart is also the word that heals ours. As the prophet lived out Hesed, so we are called to extend it, forgiving and restoring others. The story closes not in despair, but in the open arms of a God whose heart is ever turned toward us. Hosea's final cry pierces the ages. "Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God, for you have stumbled because of your iniquity." And the Spirit and the bride say, "Come." Let everyone who thirsts come and drink the water of life freely. The prophet's words hide a messianic thread. Out of Egypt I called my son. This one verse fractures time, pointing to a night flight into the desert. In Matthew chapter 2, verse 15, the refugee child becomes the true Israel. He recapitulates the nation's exodus but succeeds where they failed, embodying perfect covenant loyalty. Here is what most people miss. Jesus is the divine Hosea walking into humanity's slave block, but he doesn't pay with silver and barley. He pours out his own blood. At the cross, a Roman spear lances the divine side, and water mingles with blood. That wound is the window into a broken heart, the ultimate demonstration of Hesed. The marriage metaphor reaches its zenith. A bride once stained now stands radiant, and a great multitude cries, "The wedding of the Lamb has come." Hesed in flesh. Hosea chapter 14 verse 1 remains the open door. Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God. This one Hebrew word, Hesed,